I've never felt excited for coleslaw, especially next to fried chicken, ribs, mac and cheese, and Texas toast. Sometimes it can feel like a wet blanket. As a summertime staple with heavier fried food, the combo of mayo and cabbage just isn't quite the bright, refreshing side salad I'm looking for. But hey, I might have never had good coleslaw, and I don't want to yuck your yum. Plenty of people love it, and I don't even mind it. But I know there's a version of this dish that I, personally, can really love, and I'm gonna find it. And who knows, maybe along the way I'll learn a thing or two about what makes this dish so special. So, after trying some coleslaw and making it at home, I think there are some things I can work on. First, I want to explore other options besides the cabbage mayo combo. I also think we can go brighter and more acidic since we're usually pairing this with heavy food. I think it could use more flavors in general. I also wonder if we can have more fun with the texture. Sometimes it's just wet. And lastly, why is it always room temp? We gotta go crisp and cool. According to the experts, coleslaw is a side dish consisting primarily of finely shredded raw cabbage with a salad dressing or condiment, and then literally anything else you want. Which, by definition, is kimchi, the answer to everything. That was so easy. But for fun, I'll try to find my second favorite coleslaw. I read about so many variations, including some that have onion, pineapple, butter, and cheddar. Vinaigrette, cheese, fruit, cream, coleslaw contains multitudes, and I'd barely scratched the surface. It was time to enter the coleslawverse. One variation I read about was red slaw, a ketchup-based slaw that's apparently the most common variety in parts of North Carolina, so I had to try it.
Whoa.
Sweet and incredibly tangy from the ketchup, smoky and spicy from the paprika, this was nothing like what I thought coleslaw could be. I also wanted to try a pickled version, so I made curtido, a lightly fermented cabbage relish from El Salvador. This was my first time using Mexican oregano. It has this strong, earthy, punchy aroma that gave this slaw such a complex depth and quality. The amount of variety and the broad definition of coleslaw leaves me a lot to work with, which is exciting. But it's also a little overwhelming. So I'm just gonna start building my coleslaw from the ground up, starting with cabbage. But what exactly is cabbage? I'm gonna have to do some research. You'd probably recognize this as cabbage, but did you know that this is also cabbage? And this, 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 and this. These all come from the same wild brassica plant, selectively bred for different characteristics. The flower for broccoli, the leaves for kale, and the buds for Brussels sprouts. The result has led to over 400 varieties of cabbage. So, I went to the grocery store at a normal hour because I wasn't up all night looking up cabbage varieties, and I bought every cabbage I could find. I brought my new babies home,
My cabbages!
and then I put them all in a beautiful row like this. We've got Brussels sprouts, Savoy cabbage, green cabbage, red cabbage, white cabbage, Shanghai choy, baby Napa, Joy choy, Tuscan kale, curly kale, and Shanghai tip, which I forgot to include here. I then did a taste test, starting with Brussels sprouts, which were pretty bad, super bitter. I mean, I'm not sure what else I was expecting. I gave it a 0. The Joy Choy had a lot of water in it, which was refreshing, but it was really bitter and grassy. The green cabbage though, that was really good. No bitterness, slightly sweet, refreshingly watery but not wet, no notes. I tried the purple cabbage next because I feel like recipes use them interchangeably and I always wondered if there's a difference. And there definitely is. The purple's not as sweet, but extremely crunchy. I love the texture. I'm not getting as many flavors out of it, so I'm gonna give it an 8. The white cabbage was a really cool in-between of green and purple. It's not as sweet or as crunchy as either, but still really enjoyable. The Napa was pretty neutral, except for a slightly bitter aftertaste. Now, the curly kale, I mean, this was nearly inedible. Shockingly bitter, almost painful, which was really surprising to me because I love kale. The Tuscan kale wasn't as bitter, but still pretty unpleasant. The baby Napa was a lot more bitter than the Napa, super unpleasant. And then I took a 2-minute break. I was feeling nauseous. What I thought would be a fun afternoon cabbage tasting had turned into a fight for my life. I tried the last 2 and didn't even write down a rating because I felt like I couldn't even taste things properly anymore. I felt betrayed, confused, sick to my stomach. I eat raw kale all the time. I was definitely missing something. I needed to do more research. So obviously Dan Souza already has an amazing video on this topic. But basically, a lot of brassicas release bitter compounds when their cell walls break. It's a common defense mechanism against being eaten, but humans are able to bypass that through the process of cooking. When eaten raw though, it helps to massage these vegetables. I'm not sure how hard though, I feel like the harder the better. Basically pre-chewing them to release these compounds, and then you can wash them away. I'd always heard about massaging kale, but always thought it was kind of a joke, cause, it sounds like a joke. I tried it and I was really surprised at how much of a difference it makes. But I was still picking up on some bitterness. Dan Souza points out some other strategies, such as letting your kale soak in hot tap water or sit in dressing, which breaks down more of those compounds. So I decided to redo my taste test by massaging all the bitter vegetables and letting them sit in a basic vinaigrette, which will replicate the final product more closely than just eating them plain.
Wow.
And the difference was night and day. There was zero bitterness to any of the cabbages except for the Brussels sprouts. Those couldn't be saved. The kales didn't have that much flavor, so it became all about texture. It never gets wet or soggy. It's leafy but firm, and the bumpy texture traps in the dressing really well. It's crazy how different the bok choys became. They all felt similar to the baby napa, just not as grassy. The red cabbage held up the best though to the dressing. I started mixing and matching my favorite varieties, but the bok choys were actually too watery and felt like they turned the coleslaw too wet. The sweetness of the green cabbage with the extra crunch of the purple and the leafiness of the kale and its ability to hold on to more dressing led to the best mouthfeel and a really interesting medley of textures. I also realized I'd never really thought about the taste of cabbage before. It was always just a blank canvas to me, but I'm starting to notice just how sweet and refreshing some of the varieties actually are. Like I was worried about how to eat the pounds of cabbage I had left over, but it was actually kind of nice. Cabbage salad, cabbage wraps, cabbage stir fry, cabbage stew, cabbage pancakes, pickled cabbage, cabbage in my sandwich. I made this batch 4 weeks after I bought the cabbage. It's amazing how long it lasts. By the way, my next video in this series is meatloaf, so if this one's going okay so far, maybe subscribe. It's one of the most cost-effective vegetables you can buy, and it tastes great. Anyway, everyone helped out finishing every last bit of cabbage, and we all loved it.
No! I don't want to keep eating cabbage.
With 2 parts green cabbage to 1 part purple to 1 part kale, I built the foundation to my perfect coleslaw. I also threw in some carrots, because orange tastes good. Just look at it. And with that, we solved the issue of texture. As for being too wet, I salted my cabbage after chopping, and just 10 minutes later, this much water came out. That's all water that would have ended up sitting at the bottom of my slaw. The salt also adds a nice crispiness to the cabbage and brings out more of its flavor. I then rinsed some of the salt off and patted everything dry. By the way, because cabbage has so many layers and crevices, I prefer washing it after chopping instead of before. Plus, that way I get to appreciate the beauty that is purple cabbage water. And now we move on to dressing. It's tough when your options are limitless, so I broke it down into a few categories. Alternate ways to get creaminess from pecan, avocado, and yogurt. Some fruits, because I love fruit. A Chinese chicken salad inspired sesame soy ginger dressing, because technically, Chinese chicken salad is coleslaw too. And then an attempt to make a mayo-based dressing I like. The pecan was good, but the nuttiness might be too heavy. It had a fall, cozy quality that didn't quite feel right. Couldn't picture it going with heavy foods. The avocado green goddess was super bright and fresh, and even though it's creamy, it'd still pair well with something heavy. I was really happy with this one. The pomegranate dressing was light and refreshing, but too tart, kind of one-dimensional, too runny and wet. The blackberry flavor wasn't quite coming through enough. It was also a little too tart. The seeds were really getting in the way. I definitely needed to mess around with it more, but my mind kept going back to the green goddess and how much more I loved that flavor profile. The Asian pear was definitely not the right flavor. A sort of applesauce consistency that didn't feel right either. The sesame soy ginger was okay, but it didn't feel as universal as some of the other dressing. Around here is when I start to realize just how versatile American coleslaw is, and I wanted a dressing that could preserve that amazing versatility, not limit it. The yogurt was good, but I couldn't see it pairing well with barbecue or fried chicken. It had more of a Mediterranean vibe. As for the mayo, I just don't like it as a primary flavor. And we have our dressing. However, while putting together all these dressings, I couldn't help but think back to that very first coleslaw I made. Yeah, I wasn't wowed by it, but it was incredibly simple and easy, with cheap ingredients I already had on hand. There's something to the humbleness of not just cabbage, but also coleslaw, and I felt a little sad deviating too far from those simpler times. As I was mulling this over, one day I reached the bottom of my jar of jam, and I had a ton of leftover cabbage, so I decided to throw together a lazy dressing that I actually ended up liking more than any of the fruit dressings I'd tried, and it was insanely easy. I also recalled one of my favorite contexts I find cabbage in, fish tacos, usually with tomatoes, crema, lime, and cilantro. So I wondered if I made fish tacos, minus the fish taco, it could make for a good coleslaw. Now when I say crema, it was always sour cream and mayo, but when I saw how easy it is to make actual crema, I figured I'd give it a try. Just make sure you use sour cream with live cultures, and then ferment it in a warm place. I used the yogurt setting on my Instant Pot. Wow, it was like an extremely rich sour cream, but not quite as sour. It turned out thicker than I expected, but when I added the lime, it turned into a really nice consistency. I also added some chipotles for a little kick. This and the jam are as simple as dressings can get, and I loved both of them. These are probably the coleslaws I would actually make for myself, but if dressing to impress, I'm still gonna stick with the Green Goddess. But I'm glad I found some other options that still preserve coleslaw's simplicity, ease, and cheapness. So in the spirit of coleslaw, I wanted to see how much I could simplify the Green Goddess dressing, which is already a simplified version of a recipe from Stephen Cusado. Without compromising the taste in any way whatsoever, this is what I ended up with. And now, it was time. After dedicating my life to cabbage, I've now found a coleslaw that I would genuinely be excited to have. A slaw that deserves a seat at the table, just as much as fried chicken, ribs, burgers, and Texas toast. It's bright, refreshing, crunchy, sweet, creamy, chilled to perfection. I love coleslaw. There's only one thing left to do. I can't think of a better way to enjoy my new coleslaw than alongside my number one favorite coleslaw and some tonkas, outside on a beautiful day, in my favorite chair.